Hey friends, this is Marilyn from tarotclarity.com. I will hopefully be doing at least one reading at the end of this using the Hess Marseille 1750, this one published by Giordano Berti. I apologize, Giordano. And I chose it for a reason, but I want to get through something else first. I have mentioned in previous videos that I really like the show Love on the Spectrum. And initially I started watching it back for the first season because I had an interest in autism, as it is prevalent in my family. So that's what it, attracted me to it, to see, it'd be interesting to see how this works, and how they make a show of it. And it just became so enchanting that it's one of our favorite shows, because it's probably the only genuine thing on television. And it makes us all pause, I think, and say, whoa, these people are very human, because sometimes some people just don't feel that way. Now, I'm going to get into it, so I don't know if you're here for it. But I grew up in the 60s, and I had a brother who was born in 1960. And I was the eldest, so I was a little bit older than him. But he was born with something that they couldn't quite figure out what it was, because he wasn't classic anything. Because in those days, 1960, there wasn't any such thing as autism, So my parents, though, I was the older one, and my mother had 4 babies in 4 years. So by the time he was a toddler, my parents had already seen how the eldest one was and how the 2 younger ones were, and that the one that came second maybe something was going on, So I have to give my parents credit for that, and I also have to give my parents credit for taking him everywhere, because there were so many times I was carted around to specialists, because my mother had to go, and I guess she couldn't leave me home or whatever. So I know my parents were very determined to give my brother the best that they could. And for years, I think it worked out, but I guess in the early 70s, it became a thing to mainstream kids with special needs. Now, my brother, because there was no such thing as autism, unfortunately, his diagnosis was MR. That's what they called him. But because they didn't know what else to call him, so that's how he was labeled. And at some point, after he had gone to special schools, because my parents always had him be with kids like him, they just, in the wisdom of the state or whatever, they threw all the kids together. And it was hell for my brother in the 60s, because teachers included and kids were really, really cruel. It's heartbreaking. And I was, 2 years older, but because my brother, they didn't quite know what to do with him, he was delayed a year here or there. He was a little older when he graduated high school. So he ended up being closer in proximity to the younger 2 of my siblings, where I was like the elder one. So I didn't really experience what was going on in school for him. And then by the time I think he was, in high school, I was already in college, and long gone from the household. But my other brother, who's younger than him, he would come home and say, man, I don't want to say his name, but our other brother is being really, mistreated. And my parents went to those meetings and conferences, but there was just, and I think they had some satisfaction when they reported a teacher. I don't remember what it was, but that's how bad it was, And there were times as a sibling that I felt embarrassed, and I'm, on my deathbed or on my judgment day, one of the things that will play through me are the times when I wasn't enough of an advocate for my brother. Now I got to cut myself some slack, because I was a kid and it was the 60s and there was no tolerance for anything. So his life didn't get any easier even after he graduated. He couldn't really keep a job. There were no, in those days, that there wasn't any incentive to hire somebody who's special if they could fit a role in a company or in a place of business, give them a job. There was nothing like that. So he had to apply for jobs just like anybody else. And within a very brief period of time, it was clear that he wasn't neurotypical, And I think my parents wouldn't have just dropped him to a Shark Tank like that. I mean, I think definitely there was an understanding between the employer and my parents that he was definitely special needs, and could they, it wasn't an initiative that any company took, but sometimes I'm sure my parents did approach, the place and give them a heads up that we'd love for our son to work. He's got these limitations. But even with that, he didn't last long anywhere. I'm not really sure what the problem was. I think it was interpersonal, because he has no filter at all. But anyway, it was years later when we started seeing a pattern with the next generation having idiosyncrasies, and so we see that it's in retrospect, we go, oh my God, that's what he had. He was autistic. And the show is wonderful because it elevates all of us who are watching, especially if you take the moment to go to some of the other the other YouTube channels that they have individually. The parents and the stars of the show most of them have their own YouTube channel. So it's not just, you can watch them more than not just on the show. I mean, you could get to know them on their personal watch, when they do videos, and it's very interesting. And the reason I'm bringing it all up is because a show like this explains, and you fall in love with the characters. You fall in love with every last one of them, because each one of them is great for their own reasons. But it's coming at a time where, thank God, thank universe, that these folks with this way of being. I lost my train of thought. I had to take a swig of water, so I'm sorry. But these we fall in love with each and every one of these characters, and we begin to appreciate them. And I'm so happy for them, because not so long ago it wasn't like that. And even through beyond high school, my brother had a lot of challenges, a lot. And my parents, in feeling that they were doing the best, they kept him home with them. There weren't a whole lot of services where special needs folks could live together in a house, or there wasn't a whole lot of that. There were day places they could go to, but there, as far as we know, there wasn't places where they can live together and work and have some responsibility. So my parents kept him with them. And then when my father died, my mother kept him with her. And we were starting to get nervous, the rest of us, because we were like, Mom, you're like getting older, and he lives with you. And when you die, then what? We all have lives, we all have families, it's not like we could like build an extension on our houses and stuff like we want to make sure he's taken care of, because for any of us to do it, it would be hard. And plus we'd have to go through the whole thing of getting him services, if he moves out of state, because some of us live out of state. But my mom, she never got around to anything like that. And when she died, of course, I was with her until the end. I was with her for the weeks up to her death. And of course, one of her deathbed things was, you've got to promise me that you'll make sure Manny's okay. So I knew that was coming, but I knew it was coming because it was very much on my mind, and it was very much something that I was going to make sure he was okay, So my mother said it to the right person, because I was like, I'm ahead of you, Ma, I'm on it, And my mom wasn't even cremated yet, where I got on the horn and I called every single solitary person that I knew that regarding my brother and his disability, because I wanted to see what services he was entitled to, like living in a group home or something like that. So as it turned out, I was able to we asked our brother what he preferred to do. If he preferred to live with one of us, we'd have to figure it out. Or did he prefer, we arranged that we were going to put him in an assisted living so that he would live among other people. And there would be staff. There might not be there was always a nurse. There might not be a doctor on staff, but they always had nurses and, that kind of thing. So we put him there, and he initially loved it. And it was really nice because he said he wanted to, we called it having his own apartment. So that's how we phrased it. It was like, well, you want to have your own apartment? That was always something that mattered to you. And he was like, yes, yes. So I took him to all these assisted living facilities within my area in the state. We must have gone to at least 7 or 8. And there were 2 that I thought were capable of helping my brother or understanding, because I spoke to them and they knew, Now he was never diagnosed, remember, as autistic, because there was not that wasn't on the list of things to be diagnosed for. As you recall, they classified as MR. So, but I explained, I said, like he doesn't have a typical brain. So, he has no filter. And I told them all this. He has no filter, blah, 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 blah. And they were fine, they said, okay. But as it turns out, I don't think they had the best staff. And I went once a week. My siblings went maybe once a month. No, I went once every 2 weeks initially, because it was like a 45-minute drive. But it seemed like the nice one. There were ones that were closer to me, but that one seemed like the nicest one on the surface. But as it turned out, during COVID, my brother lost probably at least 80 pounds because he was neglected. And I think also the staff they had at that time really didn't give a rat's fanny. And at the least, I would say he was neglected. At the worst, I would say he was abused. And we weren't allowed to see him. We were not allowed to go in. So what I would do when I say I visited once, twice a month, I would go and sit outside of his window and wave and make sure he saw me, that kind of thing. But, he's on the other side of the room. I'm outside the window. I couldn't really see him all that well. It only mattered to me that he could see me, that I was going. So then finally, when we were allowed to go in, go in and be guests, and we saw our brother. It was horrific. And I should have paid attention to some of the red flags, but I know that he had lacking intersocial skills. So when staff would complain that he said something that was not appropriate, I mean, I got it, and I would talk to him, but of course it just never would, he wouldn't change his pattern of speaking to people, because when I would say things like, that is really not nice to say, so I need you to be nicer, his answer would be, I am nice, I just told the truth, just like but you can't. You don't have to say everything that you're thinking, but at any rate, so there was that going on. And it's not like they didn't know, but the staff they had was just kind of mean to him. And at any rate, he was neglected, the story he tells. And he tells the truth because he doesn't know how to lie, But he said that they would ignore him and he had to get up and they wouldn't come and get him. He was a fall risk. And he would ring the bell and they completely ignored him. And he got up and he fell and he broke his hip. So now since then, that's probably 2 or 3 years ago, he's been in a wheelchair. And to top it all off, the poor guy has Parkinson's disease, So neurologically, his wiring, because it's I guess, it's like they're not neurotypical, right? So their wiring is a little different. So his wiring is a little different, and it's manifesting in his elder years because I guess there's a little bit of a short circuit. So now, happily, we took him out of there, and I have him in a place it is a nursing home. There's, I can't sugarcoat it any other way. And it's not because I don't want my brother. I have a room that's called Manny's room, So we have a room for him. But the problem is he has to be lifted up and down with a Hoyer lift. And his problems are such that I can't physically do it, at this stage. So he's got 24/7 care, and I must say it's good. It's good, and he has friends, and he's really happy there, But sometimes I just, pause. Well, not just sometimes. It's like almost every day. It's in my mind that I've been, blessed with such a good. I've been blessed with, such a good, life, and my brother was so shortchanged, and. I've done a lot of thinking on that topic, but it is what it is. And now I see him once a week, at least, sometimes more than that. And we all get together. The only time my siblings and I ever get together is for him. So we get together once a year on his birthday where we all visit him at the same time. Otherwise, we go, I go once a week, and my other siblings go when they can. But I make sure, there's a presence there for him once a week. So excuse me, I have such a dry mouth, so that everybody knows that there's people in his life who really love him, and I know all the nurses by name. I speak to them. I have regular quarterly checkups with the staff, and I also involve a social worker that I have hired to help us and to make sure he gets nobody tries to pull anything over on him, And so, he's definitely got an advocate, and it wasn't easy. It really wasn't easy. For years after my mother died, I would make phone calls to try to get my brother help. And then I would get somebody who helped me, and then they said they were going to do everything and to call back in a day or two and they'll get back to me. And then when I would call the same number again, I would never get the same person. In fact, I called the same number for 18 months and I never got the same person. So every time I called, not only could I not get the same person, so there was no fluidity, there was no record of the last conversation with the last person. It was horrific. It was horrific. And, I'm a reasonably intelligent person. And I know that there's services, and I know there's people that you need to contact to get, social services for some, because up until, my brother was in his late 50s, he wasn't getting social services. My parents took care of him, So I had to do this from scratch. I had to figure out, all of this, and it was really hard, which is another thing that this show is bringing attention to, because these, it's wonderful to see that there's so many social services available to these young people, because it was like pulling teeth getting help. And finally, and because my brother is now in his 60s, the living accommodation thing is, he's too old, because, the living thing is to get younger people together, live together, they go to work and stuff like that. But he would have been in a house with young people, and he would have been like in his late 50s, So, I don't think that would work out for anybody who would live in that house, But at any rate, I just went off on this diatribe because this show gives me hope, When I saw this show, it's like, wow, people like my brother won't have to go through this, I mean, his life has been, but through like typical eyes, neurotypical eyes, his life seems so tragic, But when you talk to him, and when I ask questions, he will admit that there was some cruelty against him. He spoke up, he remembers that, But for the rest of his life, he seems like he had a jolly little life when he talks. And he has a memory like a sieve. I mean, he's one of these people, like you say a date and you say a location, and he'll tell you everything you did, I have dry mouth, excuse me. I had a procedure this morning, and they gave me some, whatever they gave me. They said there would be some side effects, and apparently that's one of them. Yeah, whatever they put in my veins made me cough when it came out my mouth. I went into a coughing fit. It was really weird. Anyway, so through my eyes, as a neurotypical person, I just, my heart breaks whenever I think of my brother. My whole life it has. Now, it's probably made me an empathetic person because I grew up with somebody who was special, and I was constantly defending him. There were a few times where I'm ashamed to say that I felt embarrassed, and I'm my worst judge on that. But, for the most part, we were a family, and, we loved him. We all loved him, myself, I loved him too, And when we were home and we were kids, we played with each other. We hung out together, we watched TV together and stuff like that. But we all moved on with our lives. We got married, we had kids, and he stayed home. So, and then we would say something to my parents like, I think you should try to see if there's something for Manny. And they would get him jobs and stuff, but like I mentioned, it would never work out. And he did do a lot of day services. But I'm just sad to believe that this regime has indicated that anyone who has this disorder, they want to know who they are, like they want to like genetically alter that trait, because if you understand what they're saying, I think that's what they're saying. And I mean, we finally got it right where we're finally acknowledging these people, and we're finally saying, oh, I get it. They're so sweet. They're so nice. Let's give them a chance, right when there's an audience that's finally empathetic enough to understand that. It's like this regime comes in and says, we want to know everyone who has this trait, this genetic predisposition, because we want to change that. And it's terrifying. It's terrifying. So we can't undo what we've done for these or any other people. There's so many people who need social services, you know. They're human beings. They deserve social services. And to imagine that this part of society isn't good enough to merit money on their behalf, because the rich want to get richer. So it's disgraceful. It's disgraceful that, because this will go back to, like, is this going to, will this decision to see this as a disease take us back to 1950, 1960, and convince everyone it's just like one of these things that, you should, like, terminate the pregnancy? Because that's what it's looked like. That's what the attitude seems to be. That's what if you read the writing on the wall, that's what it kind of feels like, And just when these folks are just getting the social understanding and the need for services and stuff like that, just when that happens, they want to pull it out, the government. So the timing is just impeccable. It's and I really hope that everyone who sees that show, tells somebody about it, to watch it, because it's about really bridging the gap from neurotypical and typical thinking. And I see my brother, I see myself, to be honest. I see myself in some of the characters, and I see my brother in a few, and I see multiple family members in some of the in some of the, not characters, they're real people, but in some of the cast of that show. So anyway, I thought I would do a read on that show. Now I don't, this will be a spoiler alert. So if you don't want to watch the readings, because you don't want to know how the season 3 ends, don't watch this, because this is a spoiler alert. But for those of us who have already seen the 3 seasons, and I think there were 2 prior to the American seasons when it was in Australia, just for entertainment purposes only, because I don't want to do a fortune telling on their lives. I don't want to do that. And, because it is people who are living and it's their business, the universe isn't going to agree, to let me in on anything, because it's not my right. It's not, okay, it is a news it is kind of news topic, because, it's been in the news, and there's, it's been on podcasts. And so we all know, that these folks have made a social dent, but their personal business is just not mine. But I'd like to know, like, what are the odds of a season 4? I could do general questions. Like I said, I was going to do a spoiler alert. Well, maybe I'll spoil something in another question. That I'd love to know what are the odds of a season 4. I really hope that they go for that. So let's lay a few cards. Okay. And I've got to say, this deck shuffles like a dream. I'll do a few shuffles after. Okay, so we have the Pope. Six is a very positive number, and if we look at it in the context of the question, swords could be air, which could be communication. So the powers that be, maybe at the network, right? Look at it favorably. I mean, that's, in the context of the question, that's how I'm reading the cards. And I think they understand the wisdom in renewing. So I think it will definitely be renewed because these two characters, right, are both glancing towards, I think he isn't even looking at his acolytes. He's glancing forward, right? So both of them are glancing, both people in positions of authority. This one because, he obvious in a position of authority, and him as a master, perhaps. And the powers that be, or are in favor of the communication regarding the show. And I guess I don't need to have a quint because I think it wrapped it up pretty well, but we have a 5 and a 6 would be 11, and 11 and 9 would be 20. So 20 would be judgment. So let's just take a look at it anyway. And I maybe didn't mention it, but one of the reasons I love this deck is because I love the faces. There's such friendly faces consistently in this deck. I could pull any of the other cards that might have faces. They're just so friendly, and I guess I chose this deck for these readings because it was the friendliest deck I knew. And, those folks with autism, wherever they are on the spectrum, whoever we are on the spectrum. Oops. Oh my goodness, look what I did. Sorry. Oh darn, now I forgot what I was going to say. I think I mentioned that I would show you how nice these are to shuffle. Now remember, I do have a camera in front of me, so I can't directly see what I'm doing. Oh, darn it. I got some of them facing in the wrong direction. Oh, my goodness. Well, I'll fix that later. I just want to show you how. It shuffles like a dream. It's a great deck. And it is a little oversized. So I appreciate that it's easy to shuffle, being a chunky little deck. Okay, so let me fix my cards. I'll be right back. Okay, I thought of another question. I don't want to know anything of anybody's personal business above and beyond what they share on their own social media accounts, and they're pretty honest about their lives. So anybody who wants to see any of that, you can easily find their channels. But for those of you who have watched season 3. There are couples that were paired off, and some of them looked like they were really happy together. And I think we're clear on that there should be a season 4, and it looked like the cards even suggested that there would be a season 4. I'd like to know, maybe which couple, well, maybe we'll get clues, right? Which couple is most likely to survive season 4? And there may be multiple. Several. They all might, and I hope they do, because some of them, they're just like perfect little matches. I mean, Abby and David and Connor and her name escapes me. Georgie. How can I forget Georgie? And anyone else who I can't recall off the top of my head, but any of the rest of them that have paired up. Oh my gosh, they're such pure souls. So I guess, I don't know how easy it'll be to figure out. And then there's, what's the other young girl's name? Madison and Tyler, I think his name is. So there's a few that, ended up really hitting it off, and they kiss, and they're boyfriend and girlfriend, just like anybody else, So, and you really want to see them. I think those are the 3. Unfortunately, this is a spoiler, but Danny and Adon, they had to break up because it wasn't, working out. So I really hope to see Danny next season. I really do. And I really would love to see her find what she's looking for. At any rate, Okay, the question was, let's take some clues, and which of the four of those couples, or at least the three, and the fourth being Danny. And there's Perry. There's Perry, and I forget what her girlfriend's name is. Oh yeah, I think there's quite a few who really hit it off. So I guess there's at least 3 or 4. Let's hope I can do this. All right, here we go. 5, just 5 of swords. Connor likes swords. He has a sword collection. That's interesting. And James, I forgot James. James he doesn't have a sword collection, but he likes to cosplay. Like, I don't know if it's superheroes or some kind of like action figures from video games, I think. So there's that. And I think he has like swords or staffs, when he does that. So he may be also, these could be like each of them. And then the 10 of swords. Maybe it's including all of them, because it's completion. So maybe they'll all be back. That would be awesome if they all came back. And then there's always like somebody new. There's always somebody new. Like every season. Okay, let me come up with one more question. And this question is more in terms of seriousness. Will this regime deny social services and care for these individuals? Will there be a setback for the people, the very wonderful, productive, funny, kind, caring people on the spectrum? Will they be denied? Well, if you know who has his way, I guess so. The lunacy of the moon, in the context of the question, what is it? Lunacy. Another aspect could just be secretive mystery, anything that happens at night. Could be mental health, not lunacy, but mental health. So he's turning his back on mental health. Oh, man. And we have an odd number, a 7 of swords. Pointing down, and we don't have anything underneath it because I only intended to do a 3-card spread. But they're taking us, whenever I see upside down swords, I always think that somebody's taking a stake, making a stake. So, yeah, it looks like they've made a stake in this. Like this is on their agenda. And boy, oh boy. So, if we have a miracle, and it will take a miracle, but if we have a miracle whereby we can get back on our feet within the next few years, if it would take that long, there's a chance that their services could be saved and everything could go back, But this appears to be the agenda moving forward with this regime. And aside from the humanity of it all, it's a great show to watch, because if you are on the spectrum, and even if you are living in, that you've masked your whole life, which, let me flip the camera. I'm convinced that I masked my whole life because, as a young person, I know my struggles in school. I was a great student. I did everything, I was the kind of kid with an insatiable appetite for learning, so I wasn't stupid. That when, my father insisted on buying the encyclopedia, World Book encyclopedias, That was the thing back in the day. We didn't have computers or anything. My father, education was extremely important to him, and he bought and he updated every year. There was an update, and he kept with it, man. And my idea of a great day was if it was raining outside and I could curl up on the window ledge reading an encyclopedia from cover to cover. I read all of them, and every year when the update came, I read that, and I would read it from cover to cover because, man, I just loved learning stuff. If I had any kind of memory capacity, I'd be a genius, but I just can't, I don't retain things. I never have. I've never retained things, but in the moment, like I'm learning, I'm insatiable, and some things stick with me. I remember certain things. I mean, it's not like I don't remember anything. But at any rate, after a year, stuff changed. And so you had to get an update that anything in the book that had been updated, they'd give you the updates. We had the science updates, and there was, I think, another update. So there was like 2 types of updates, and we got them all. And I also, some of you may relate to this too, I always saw numbers and colors. I always saw it. And I still do. It's crazy. But I learned that was not something that anyone I would say, like number 1, black. People were like, what? So I figured out, that's like not something you say, And when I became a teacher, is when I realized that I had a learning disability. That's when I learned that I had a learning disability. Because as I was learning to be a teacher, and as I actually became a teacher, I became acutely aware that I had a disability. And so I knew it, And so that's what made me, I think, a great teacher. I'll say I was a great teacher. I know I was. Because I was very hands-on. We always had projects. There wasn't a single lesson that we learned that really didn't have a project associated with it, so that the kids could be part of a process, to experience what we just learned. And we would read some great books, and some of them couldn't read. Some of them had not great learning skills. But I gave them an opportunity to read. Like, we would get a book, and anyway, because kids have learning disabilities, and so we would get a book, we'd vote on it, which book we would pick to read, and we would read it to each other, and if somebody got to your turn and you didn't want to, you just pass, and then, I would read, or if another kid said, I'll do it, then we let them do it. So, and you know what, they were always enthralled. They always listened, and it was like audiobooks before there was audiobooks. And anyway, I don't know why I mentioned all that, but I got the kids to read high school level books in 8th grade. I mean, that's how we did it, but we read we read it, and we did like the concept of it, and we spoke at length about everything we read, and that's how all kids should be taught, because there's always somebody who's atypical in that room, even if they mask and even if they get through, and I had to work so hard. I mean, there was one year in 3rd grade when I got a D in math. It's my shame. But every year after that, I was a real achiever, overachiever, because I felt my parents had that expectation, because my brother was slow. I think they really had an expectation that I better be smart, So, and he was only slow in certain ways. He had a memory like a sieve. He really does. But I worked really, 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 really hard, and for the most part, I was always on the honor roll. But it wasn't because it came easy to me. It was a struggle. It was a struggle. So why am I shuffling the cards, and what are we going to do now? Let me come up with a question. It's important, I think, for all of us to watch it, because some of us might see ourselves in there, or in and some of the people we love. And, you know, it's a reminder that their experiences aren't so far from our own, right? I mean, if there's no room for them, eventually there'll be no room for us, you know. I don't know how many of you, if you're on the spectrum, if you count. I'm a counter. If I've been in your house, I've counted every window frame in your house multiple times. I go in a room, my eyes scan, I find a thing that I can count, and I start counting. So that's something you mention to people. You just do it on the sly. I know I have facial tics, which I really work really hard not to do, but I'm aware that I do them. And, oh, there's something else. I'm not going to mention it. And that's not bad, you know, it's just like something that I do. And I also, well, I have quite a few. So it's very interesting, you know, but if, you know, like I said, if they go for those folks and you see anything in there that you can just understand, recognize, then you're next. You know, that's how it happens. You know, you have to care for everybody, because eventually you're all that's left to get rid of, and there won't be anybody around to help you out. So, okay, the last one. Let's do an optimistic read. How much longer before the United States is back to observing democracy, constitutional rights? And it's not even good enough to go back to the way it used to be. It has to be better. Has to be better. So let's see, how long do we have to look forward to it getting better? And I do apologize for yapping so much. Must be the medicine. Judgment. Wow, that's hopeful. That's very hopeful. Wow. Progress. Progress in, well, it could be the government. I mean, you know, the swords could, in the context of a question, it could represent the military. It could represent government or laws. Communication. It's an odd number, so it means progress. I mean, this seems like atonement, or not atonement, accountability, you know, definitely enlightenment, you know, light being cast on something, an opportunity, right? An opportunity, fresh, new, soon, quick, right? But then we have 7 of Swords. So it may happen quickly. It may happen quickly, and somebody draws the line in the sand. It could be seen like that. It goes, you know, a window of opportunity where there's a line. I guess I see this as a line drawn in the sand. Okay, so we have 20 and 1, that's 21. 21 and 6 is 27. 27 minus 22 is the Pope. I have done a video on them, but I just wanted to show you some of these faces. They look so friendly. Oh, there he is. Such a friendly, approachable lot. So, yep. So, now there could be an adherence to something. There could be an adherence to some dogma in the context of the question. So maybe there'll be a surge, and maybe there will be momentum. but it might be a tough nut to crack, because there does seem to be an adherence. This aspect of the evangelical lies, I'm going to call it for what it is. There can't be any room for this. There can't be. And then we have air and fire. They work together pretty well. They support one another. So there might be a surge, but it won't be free and clear kind of thing. Well, maybe it'll be soonish. At least there'll be some progress. Isn't that a joyful shuffle? Anyway, friends, you've hung out with me for 51 minutes. Universe bless you. If you've hung around this long, then maybe I can ask you to hit subscribe, the like button, share it, whatever to help the channel out. Until next time, friends, peace, stay well, and please be brave.